Welcome to the Church of Obolus. The frog just blesses with another patch, which invalidates pretty much everything I said in my video on 722b, and also buffs Treant to the roof. Let's go over the most important changes.
My holiness deepens.
Outpost XP reduced from 25 per minute to 18. That was a very necessary change. These outposts were way too strong, and having map control just meant that it was very difficult to actually make some sort of comeback in the game. Also in the same line, XP talents were reduced. The reason these XP talents were so strong is that you no longer really had this sort of tension of taking a talent which then once you hit level 25 becomes useless, as was the case before 723. Whereas now, even if the game goes long and you hit 25, well, with this XP talent you also get quicker to level 30, and then you get the other talent anyway, so XP talents were really strong, so it makes sense to nerf them. Glyph duration reduced on creeps. This means that if your enemy glyphs, you can no longer just counter glyph and prevent any sort of multi-shot damage on your creeps. And here is where Ice Frog is breaking my heart. First of all, this means that the previous buff to summons is now undone. Now we are back to where we were before in terms of summons, except here this change is primarily relevant for Broodmother because her Spiderlings and Spider Rides just did very little damage, and this old 8 damage block that we had in the original 723 just meant that Spiderlings did very little damage and Spider Rides basically no damage at all. Whereas now they're back to doing damage half the time, which is the same behavior as you had previously against melee heroes with a stun shield. And this means that these other forms of damage block are no longer as strong. Because previously we had something like a Vanguard, and on a melee hero you just had so much damage block. So I think these changes make sense, but I'm still sad to see them because I of course like those summon-based heroes, those creep-based heroes. And of course it's going to make Chen a little bit weaker, but I still think he's very playable. Locked courier items will no longer be delivered. This means in the late game when you're using your courier for warding and so on, you can just lock those wards, you can lock your Quelling Blade, and you can just easily ward with your courier and still use these automatic hotkeys to deliver your regular items. And these are just some very sensible changes. Boots of Travel can no longer teleport to outposts, also a very sensible nerf. Bracers as well as Wraith Bands and Null Talismans now cost 5 less. With all these neutral items, you often find yourself running out of slots very quickly, which made these stat items a little bit weaker. Also these other items for 450 gold, these bucklers and so on, were very strong, so it makes sense to give like a slight buff to Bracers, Null Talismans and Wraith Bands. In the same way, Buckler was slightly nerfed. This item is very strong, so it makes sense. Drum was also quite strong, so now the stats are reduced. I think now with this nerf, I don't think Drums is all that good anymore. There's still of course some heroes that want to buy this item, but it's now significantly weaker than it used to be before. I'm not going to go over the neutral items in detail. These just don't come up often enough to really make them worthwhile going over here. But here, Sentry wards are now slightly more available. This is good. Silver Edge gets a slight buff here. Third Eye, this is a very important neutral item change. This item was completely busted. It was a gem that you just couldn't remove, that you couldn't drop. So this is now removed from the game. Very good change. And Vlad's gets a nerf. This is in addition to the nerf to Buckler, so Vlad's in total now costs 150 gold more. This item was quite strong, gave you a lot of sustain, and now this item gets a little bit weaker. This makes sense. But also, unfortunately, it means that this item is now a lot weaker on Chen. Already the changes made the item a little bit less desirable on Chen in 723 because you really like this damage bonus that you no longer get now, and of course the greater cost hurts Chen. And now this item is no longer something that's really very good on Chen. It's more something you might get in the late game if no one else is getting it. On to the hero changes. Abaddon gets some slight nerfs, makes a lot of sense. This hero was very strong. Bloodsinger gets a slight nerf to Blood Rage, okay, whatever. Death Pact is slightly buffed. I still think Lynx is kind of on the weak side because its ultimate just is so weak now. Crystal Maiden gets some nerfs or like a slight grade. This Arcane Aura no longer provides magic resistance. Makes sense. I'm not sure even why they put this change in there. Crystal Maiden was already strong before 723 and then they just buffed her for no reason. But to compensate for this, Crystal Nova cooldown is now reduced again. And in terms of talents, the Mana Loss Aura is now replaced by Magic Resistance Aura. I still think you probably want the GPM talent over this. So Maiden is now a little bit weaker than before, but I still think she's one of the best supports in the game. Enchantress gets some slight buffs, some more movement speed. She used to be the fastest hero in the game. Now she only has 315, so now she gets at least a little bit back of that movement speed that she used to have. And a little bit more base int, but no base damage increase. So you have slightly more mana to work with in the laning stage. And this Aghanim gets a slight buff. I still feel like Enchantress is a bit on the weak side, but we'll have to see. Juggernaut, also another hero that is a bit weak, gets some slight buffs here. Kunkka gets some slight nerfs, I still think it's going to be very strong. Lone Druid, some Spirit Bear damage, reduced by 5. This is a very justified nerf, this hero was very strong. And this is just going to make him a little bit weaker in the laning stage and also of course slightly weaker throughout the game. And now please people, can you stop going Handle the Dominator on this hero? It's just not good, it just gives you almost no damage. Spares 25 base damage. Stop going HOTD on this hero. Magnus was completely busted with his Aghanims and gets some big nerfs. I still think this hero is quite strong, I still think Aghanims is good, but it's no longer going to be completely broken. Mask gets some pretty nice buffs, especially level 1, that's a huge buff level 1. And this is going to bring this hero back in the meta a bit, because this hero was kind of underpicked, it's not really used pretty much at all in the pro scene right now, so it makes sense to buff him. Medusa, another very underused hero. Previously she was pretty much like the worst, one of the worst heroes in the game. She gets some big buffs here. I'm not sure if it's enough. Most likely you're probably going to see another 1 or 2 buffs here to Medusa and then she's going to become strong. But as of right now, I doubt this is enough. Monkey King was also another underpowered hero, gets base armor here, very important on melee heroes. And then this talent gets a slight buff. Nature's Prophet gets a slight nerf here. Max base damage reduced by 4. This means basically average base damage reduced by 2. But the much bigger change to Nature's Prophet is the damage block change. In 722B, your Treants did full damage against melee heroes. Now the damage is blocked once again. And this is a pretty big nerf to Nature's Prophet. Much bigger than this little change. But the hero was one of the strongest in the game, so it makes sense to nerf him. Oracle gets some extra base ints. Okay, whatever. Phoenix gets 1 extra armor. Puck loses 2 armor. This is a pretty big nerf to his laning stage, and just generally just makes him a bit more squishy. This was the most picked and banned hero at the qualifiers, so it makes sense to nerf him. Ricky gets some nice buffs. These are not huge, but they're gonna make his laning stage a bit more easy to play, and movement speed is always welcome. And our Tricks of the Trade has much better level 1, but max level is unchanged. And this hero gets strong in the laning stage, which was his weak point previously. Shadow Fiend gets some buffs here. This is a kind of an underpicked hero. I don't think it's actually that weak, but getting some buffs so that people start playing this hero. Sniper gets a minor buff. I still feel like Sniper is quite weak, but it's going to help a little bit. Templar Assassin, level 15 talent reduced, and level 25 talent reduced the stun duration. This was a bonkers level talent, and now it gets slightly weaker, but still it's quite strong. I still feel like Templar Assassin is going to be one of the most played mid heroes. Titan gets some changes to his Kraken Shell. Previously, before 723, you were in sort of this awkward position as a Titan Hunter of kind of having to buy a Stout Shield, but not really wanting to, because it's an item that gets obsolete very quickly. Now you no longer have to make this choice. Now you just get the Stout Shield innately as a melee hero, and you still get these old numbers on Kraken Shell, so this is a pretty good buff for Titan Hunter. Tiny Tree Grab building damage slightly reduced. Okay, this hero is very strong, makes sense. And now here we get to the big one. Treant freaking Protector. now has this extra ability, extra passive ability. Whenever you haven't taken damage in the last 3 seconds, you gain the ability to pass through trees. You're not invis, but you can pass through trees, which is almost as good as invis, and you get 25% more regen and heal and 15% movement speed bonus. And very importantly, this ability does not get disabled if you take damage. So once you have this ability, you can just pass through trees, take all the damage you want, and still keep walking through your trees. And this ability that you have right from the start. And you know how whenever Ice Frog reworks a hero by combining 2 abilities into one and giving that hero an extra ability, like he did with Lone Druid when he gave him his Savage Roar, or with Necro when he got the Ghost Shroud. These kind of changes always make the hero extremely strong, and then it usually takes a couple of patches with a couple of nerfs to get this hero back into line. What Treant is getting here is even better than that. He just gets an extra passive ability and doesn't lose anything in the process. He even gets this little free bonus here for Scepter. Now Scepter lost a little bit of its value when the ultimate damage was added innately into the hero rather than being a part of the Aghanims. But now if you have Aghanims, you also get this basically free talent. This used to be a talent that gave you this ability every 3 seconds. Every 10 seconds is almost as good, and it's just free when you have Scepter. If that weren't enough, Living Armor is now global again. Some of the values are a bit reduced, but overall I think this is definitely a buff to Living Armor. And then we get to talents. Level 10 talents change from 10 cooldown reduction to Nature's Guise Invisibility. What they don't really tell you here is that this invisibility stays if you attack someone. This talent is some StarCraft level stuff. You are basically turned into a Dark Templar if you have this talent. Some of the talents also changed around, nothing too impactful here. But just overall, this is a huge buff to Treant Protector. Undying gets a slight buff here. Flesh Golem also slightly buffed, makes sense. Ursa, despite the previous nerfs, is still very strong, so he gets some nerfs here. This is a very minor nerf, and then this, okay. Venge gets also a couple of nerfs here. She's also really strong, so it makes sense. And then Venomancer also gets some slight nerfs here. Of course, this hero also was one of the strongest in the game, so it all makes sense. Overall, I'm kind of sad to see this patch on a personal level, because it's a nerf to Chen, it's a nerf to some of these other micro-based heroes I like to play. So that kind of sucks, but I think overall it's good for the health of the game. It nerfs a lot of these broken heroes, buffs some of these underused heroes, remove the third eye, which is an important change. I don't know about these Treant changes. Certainly this hero is going to get nerfed in the future and it's going to get toned down. I think it's kind of like a cool concept. I'm not sure if this permanent invisibility while you're attacking is going to stay. Maybe that's a bug, but it's kind of, if you read the description here, it kind of makes sense by that description. So I'm leaning towards it not being a bug, but of course it's going to be really strong. Maybe you're going to see some sort of core Treant Protector played with this ability. But overall, I think I like this direction for Treant Protector. It makes him have more interaction with trees once again. And just from a design perspective, I kind of like this. I just wish they would nerf him soon, because it's going to be really annoying to play against this hero. So what are your favorite changes in this patch? What are your least favorite changes? Tell me down in the comment section. Coming up on this channel is going to be an updated version of my guide to Chen creeps. And if you don't want to miss that, please join the fold and subscribe to this channel and ring the little bell. In the meantime, take a look at these videos, and Obelisk willing, I'll see you there.